why we see maybe less deals with a higher value. I guess if you can give us a wrap up of what you think about these two trends, and then we can deep dive into the rest of the content.
Definitely. There has been a lot of, lot of momentum shift within the deal count versus the deal value. So, and the main trigger for that from a private equity standpoint is the M&A activity. That's why, you see the lesser deals with more value. The deal count is less and there is more deal value. And M&A drives that particular diverse sectors actually. If you look at healthcare, if you look at the recent merger and acquisition activity that is happening across the globe, and due to that macroeconomic uncertainty as well as the stability, that is the main reason the deal values of the investors are resilient, and also they are confident in this. And that's why the structuring of those deals are happening more from an M&A perspective with larger and larger. Whenever there is an M&A transaction, definitely it's a high valuation deal. The pipeline is definitely strong. And as they are in the moment of realization, if it's already an existing deal that is going to be tapped in, so definitely those are the M&A pushes that you see. And those are the large transactions that are happening. Whether it was Twitter, whether it was any other deals that are happening in the past, it's all through that deal count versus deal value. And if that particular portfolio company is already there, I think the perspective of that macro effect on the trade, on the overall commerce as well as the political shift, that is what is changing the deal count versus deal value.
That's fair enough. Now, again, just to speed up a little bit on what we touched, but if we now look at I picked on the Reuters article, which says state antitrust enforcement targets PE in healthcare. Now, of course, I was trying to explain, this brings, a lot of inefficiencies, I guess, if you want to put it down that way, right? Because there is more operational burden, there is more regulation. Like, what do you see happening here? Because, for example, from my perspective, I do see definitely costs and, as I said, burden of running deals in this space is gonna raise, which is not a good thing for the funds. On the other hand, it could be actually taking away a lot of funds from the healthcare into other sectors that probably are not, that they're not as scrutinized as the healthcare one. What is your vision here?
So actually, the healthcare value chain itself, it starts with clinical trial to disruption, and where you see the entire engagement from a provider standpoint, from a patient standpoint, from a technology standpoint. So the key effects that are driving this antitrust thing is restriction or enablement of the regulatory shift itself. It's on sometimes there is sometimes there is a clear restriction on M&A activity in bigger markets in this space, because you can't have the insurance provider be the same guy who's doing all the other value chain things in a entire sector. So that is a really a key driver where we see that regulation restriction or enablement, and that's what drives the deals. If there is an enablement happening within that region or the sector, you will see most of the deals happening faster, quicker. If there is a restriction coming from both on the regulatory side, from a compliance side, especially you see those more on the insurance side, healthcare insurance side, because it is not only just having companies merge, but it is the data that's being managed by those companies and what kind of accountability and transparency that these companies should maintain, and at the same time how those mergers would affect the other people in the value chain, whether it's small companies or large companies. So that is where the antitrust comes into play, and it is very laser focused on right now on AI, how you manage your data, and at the same time the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. All those other areas also come in, and that's where the regulatory enablement happens. And if there needs to be a restriction, definitely there will be a restriction based on those conditional effects. So, for example, if you look at a macro level, the economic conflicts are allowing not to invest into companies that have certain origin certain origin of the funds basically. So that enablement versus restriction is predominantly driven by, which part of the value chain is being either for merger or an acquisition opportunity, and that needs to be clearly assessed, not only from a current state standpoint, but at least from a future state standpoint. How does this merger happens? For example, if you look at AT&T's deals that happen, they went into Dish Network and they did all of the media acquisitions possibly they could, but financially there was some challenges as well. They have to divest those deals. So whenever there is a regulatory effect, you will clearly see the deals happening from a PE standpoint, both from investment versus divestment. And that is what the key is for restriction versus enablement. When there is a divestment happens, then definitely you are working in a restricted environment.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Thank you, Vinay.